Thanks for joining us, Barbara. We know you've been very busy lately. You're here in Melbourne at the moment. We just wanted to catch up with you about what's happening in this court case, that this injunction or stay of execution that you've brought up against Jenny Macklin.
The first injunction was that she couldn't execute any of the 40-year sublease arrangements that she's got going already with our council and the town campers or associations. And the second was that she couldn't enter into compulsory acquisition. And I know for a fact that with our housing association meeting, we were actually forced into signing over our camps under duress, and I know for a fact that's true because of the negotiations and that she just started announcing it. But what she has failed to do also is mention, and anyone else, that all camps were signed over under duress, and that's basically being forced to sign over.
So, Barbara, this is your first time that you've been involved in the court system. It's your first court experience, and what is your experience of the whole court environment?
It's a lot of concentrating, especially if you don't know the legal jargon. The opposition has to put in submissions by the end of Friday, and my team has to also find some more evidence by next Wednesday. And then that's when the judge will probably compile information, take another month to decide on the decision, month or two. So crossing our fingers, the Racial Discrimination Act should be reinstated by then, and then that will give us a better chance at fighting the case, and then it'll also start that ripple effect for people back home in remote communities to also do the same. But yeah, she's just going to drum that line and say under the Section 47 of the NTER, which is the Northern Territory Emergency Response, that she's got the power to actually make a decision to compulsory acquire our camps or our outstations or our communities. Because under the intervention she has. And that's the kind of powers that Mel Brough and John Howard gave themselves, more or less, that for us to live under a dictatorship of the Australian government. And that's how it's going to be for a while, unless they get rid of the legislation of the intervention.
So, from your point of view, the Rudd government, has anything changed from the Howard approach to since they lodged the intervention? Did you have hopes that the Labor government would take things differently, and if so, how do you feel about the new direction, or is there a new direction?
Well, like myself and many others that is affected by the intervention and living on all these prescribed areas throughout the Northern Territory, a lot of people had faith in the new government. Got rid of the Howard government for over 11 years, and yet here's new government, Labor coming in, new Prime Minister, new Indigenous Affairs Minister. We thought that there was a chance of actually changing the Northern Territory intervention, emergency response, and what they did in Parliament was actually go into bipartisan partnership to tackle all these problems that are happening within Aboriginal communities, Recently, up in Darwin, they just had a COAG meeting, before they had this meeting.
What's COAG, sorry?
Council of Australian Governments, so that's all state and territory, from around the country. And what they found is that there wasn't a pedophile ring in every community. They found that the intervention would close the gap, but they've actually found that it's widening the gap. And they also found out that there are no rivers of grog that flow into Aboriginal communities. And that's what we were saying right from the start, you know, our men don't abuse our women and children, they're not all, everybody on a community is not all alcoholics. So, yeah. A lot of Aboriginal people thought that we had a bit of faith in the new government, but because they wanted to work with the opposition and tackling all these issues, that's what I don't understand, is the previous government didn't do anything to help, and the current government is not doing anything to help, and you can't keep enforcing a policy on a group of people. It's not going to change overnight.
One of the dimensions of the intervention that is so obvious is that it's so divisive between in Australian, not just in politics, but even in everyday conversations. It can really create a lot of tension, because there are a lot of people who are really undecided. They're not pro-intervention and not anti-intervention. People who support the intervention, what faith do they still have in the intervention in the Northern Territory, even in your communities?
Well, people like myself who's directly affected by the intervention will say that it's wrong, and will say that people are not providing their families properly anymore. It's gotten worse, actually. There are more people homeless, and there is more overcrowding within the major townships, and especially on our town camps. And then you will have Aboriginal people in high places that will say that it's good for our people, but those people like that are not affected by the intervention. And those people that are in high places are, in fact, or pro-intervention, are the ones that the Minister is listening to. She doesn't listen to anybody like myself who is affected at a grassroots level. I know that there are people back home in the Territory who say that it's good for Aboriginal people, and they needed this kind of change to start, more like a redesign, assimilated policy. People will say that it's like that, and that's how people are affected by it. But people that are undecided, I think they don't know enough. And then other people that know and don't want to say yes or no, There are some people that will say, well, they're all alcoholics and that's all they know, and they all abuse their children, I grew up in my houses. When I was growing up, we had at least 15 to 20 kids come through our house. And that was mainly all my cousins. And my mum and dad looked after them and cared for them. And those people that are affected by it and speaking out, they're the ones that are not being listened to. And the government's not giving them a time of day. And then you will have people in high places saying that we're putting a stop to the housing developments, or we're stopping these children from getting a better and safer chance in life. But, people like myself want what's best for children and for families, because there's no other way, you just do what you can and make the best of it. And I think the Minister has not actually taken notice of the mothers that do the right thing, and the old ladies, I've got old great-grandmothers and grandfathers that are still alive today that went through this process of being controlled by the government in the past when they were young girls and young fellas, and they're just reliving it. It's like a nightmare to them.